Okay, so how's that? How's that? Do we like this? Is this better? Hi squad, welcome back, and dog, bless you. This video isn't going to be a particularly long one, at least I don't think so. I'm just going to expand a little bit on what I talked about in my last video, which if you haven't watched it yet, do or don't, I'm not the boss of you. It's only partially relevant to what I want to hone in on here, and only because it gives a really good example of the problem. Just know that if you watch it, yes, I am aware that the audio is incredibly quiet. I promise I did my best. Every time I turned it up, it started clicking and popping like a dolphin in a beatboxing competition, so I don't really know what was going on there. I'm really bad at technology, but I'm pretty good at talking, so let's get to the point. Whenever a celebrity or politician or coworker or friend says something or some things that are there's a tendency for supporters of that person to immediately go on the defensive and start trying to cover their ass. And this can be done in a number of different ways. Downplaying what was said to make it seem less awful, grasping at imaginary hypothetical context, bringing up the pain and the struggles of the person who made the comments as a means of justifying them. There's a whole bunch of tactics that people may engage in whether or not they're aware of it. But there's one very common one that I'd like to touch on here today, and that is dismissing people who have criticized this person for those comments by saying that they are just being sensitive. Now, let's forget for a moment that we actually have a pretty good understanding of the fact that language impacts attitudes, which then go on to impact policies and behavior. Because while it is scientifically supported, I understand that a great many people probably haven't had access to this information or may struggle a little bit to make those connections. So let's just completely put that aside for a moment. I want to try something a little different. Let's pretend for a second that every single person who has ever reacted negatively to a joke is doing so purely from a place of just being sensitive and being offended. Hell, maybe you don't even have to pretend. Maybe you actually believe that already, in which case, lean into that. So here we are in our hypothetical situation, where every single negative response to every single controversial joke that's ever been made is simply a matter of people being sensitive. And my question to you is this. Okay, and? Because the more I think about it, the less that it makes sense that this is brought out as a defense of shitty remarks time and time again. If you were physically leaning on someone and they asked you to stop because you were making them uncomfortable, you'd be kind of a dickhead if you told them that their discomfort isn't reason enough for you to stop doing what you're doing. So why are words different? I'd actually like to know, why are they different? Why is simply not saying something more offensive to you than someone being hurt by something that was said? Where's the scale upon which you compare these two things, and why this? Why that? Have you ever actually asked yourself this question? And can you give a semi-decent explanation as to why your inability to moderate your own speech takes precedence over someone else's emotional experience? And really, take time to think about that. After all, we do choose what we say, but we don't really choose our feelings, at least not for the most part. I am asking for a logical explanation here. And don't hit me with that whole, oh, because my free speech thing, nobody's free speech is under attack. Do you really believe that? You absolutely have the ability to be an asshole. It's just that other people also have free speech and can tell you that you're being an asshole when you're being an asshole. Do you understand how that works? Another thing I really want to encourage you to ask yourself is why you're so ready to go to bat for a celebrity who could not care less about you. They are literally unaware of the fact that you draw breath on this planet, but you can't take 5 seconds to consider the emotional experience of a person that you're actually interacting with. Doesn't that seem weird to you? Does that not seem really weird? Unless your prime goal in life is to be a sycophant, you know that you can change this tendency, right? Now, maybe your issue is not so much with the feelings as the magnitude of them. The reaction to the action is not exactly equal. And maybe that perceived inequality is something that you take issue with, which is entirely fair. But if so, I'd like to encourage you to tap into that context creation power that you are very ready, willing, and able to give your favorite celebrities and apply it to other people as well. When you see marginalized or abused people having an intense reaction to something, what you are seeing is the tip of the iceberg. Maybe you've seen them on social media ranting into the void, and it's really not a good look. But before we apply an explanation to this behavior, let's take a second to consider. Do you really, truly believe that most people who are doing this are doing so just because, Or do you think that maybe there are some unseen events that you are not aware of? Maybe there are pains and pressures accumulating beyond this single moment of catharsis that you are actually witnessing. If you were watching a television series, you wouldn't jump in on the last episode of a season and be like, whoa, what's going on? Like, nothing is making sense. Where did all of this come from? This all seems excessive and really out of the blue. Like, you wouldn't do that, because you understand that there are missing pieces that put all of these wild things that are happening in context. So why are you so incapable of extending the same understanding to people? I mean, what's with that? You know, we're social species, right? That we have this incredible ability to consider each other's perspectives and take time to think about what other people are going through. It's a freaking superpower that we have. But even if you struggle with this understanding, why is you're just being sensitive the nail in the coffin when it comes to people voicing their concerns with something? And to pull that thread a little bit further, where's the acknowledgement of your emotional investment in the person you're defending? I mean, if you were as balanced, rational, and devoid of feelings as you believe yourself to be, I kind of feel like you wouldn't be actively misconstruing the words of total strangers on the internet specifically so that you could get in a fight with them about your favorite celebrity. What I'm getting at here is that bullying and seeking conflict are also emotional responses. Most humans have feelings, and if you think the zero compassion approach is the superior means of handling them, I sincerely feel bad for you. I really do. It must really suck to move through the world believing it to be cruel as a default. If you're leaning into cruelty before it can get you first, you're not being tough. You're just submitting to what you think is the most powerful force around you. It is a far greater testament to your strength of character to challenge cruelty than to feed into it. Now, don't get me wrong. I mentioned earlier that we can't control our feelings, but we absolutely can control the actions that we take based on them. We've already talked about the fact that bullying and conflict are one manifestation of how feelings can cause harm. But another way that they can cause harm is if someone were to say, for example, this thing that you said hurt me, therefore you don't get to talk anymore. Anyone doing that is also missing the nuances of being human and how we communicate. But generally that doesn't happen. I mean, I don't know what spaces you're hanging out in where this tends to happen a whole lot, but if you're finding that this is the case, you should maybe branch out a little bit, or perhaps ask yourself if this is actually commonplace in your direct experience, or if maybe it's just commonplace in the conversations that you have or things that you have been told about certain groups of people. Big difference there. Overwhelmingly, I see people going back to Twitter as an example of this horrible behavior that's ruining free speech. But here's the thing, friend. Here's the thing. Maybe the issue here is less that this is some rampant phenomenon that's unraveling the fabric of society, and more an indication of the fact that you need to take a wee bit of a break from Twitter. I don't know what you need to do as a stand-in, but maybe, just maybe, if the bulk of your understanding of current trends and human interaction comes from a platform notorious for conflict where people are limited to communicating in 280 characters or less, maybe that's part of the problem. And this goes for everyone in these conversations. We all really need to remember that our weird little games of outrage telephone aren't really representative of the grand scheme 90% of the time. But if you are one of those people who's brushing off criticism with the just being sensitive excuse, I really need to stress the fact that social media is just the tip of the iceberg. You are choosing to use that as your source when better information is available. Many of us who are members of the offended wokies team have in fact taken time to sit down and calmly explain the problems at hand in far greater detail than a Twitter post would allow. And most of us have done so in a way that we really hope is accessible to you, because it improves our lives considerably if you take time to understand. It doesn't really help us to just make you feel bad. In many cases, that actually makes things a lot worse. But if that's where your attention is, if you are focusing entirely on people who are lashing out from that breaking point that I mentioned earlier, purely with intent to hurt you, what does that say about you? What does that say about the value that you put on feelings? If people not being kind and passive enough in their efforts to communicate their pain is reason enough for you to dismiss it, who's really weaponizing their feelings? Now, there are numerous reasons why you might not agree with someone on something, and maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong. But someone having really strong feelings about something that hurt them is not, on its own, reason for you to disregard them outright. That is just silly. You're better than that. that's it on this for now, but we're going to dig into this topic a little bit further next time when we talk about Mean World Syndrome. On a happier note, I would like to extend my gratitude to Jesse Gender for sharing my last video and welcome all of the subscribers that found my channel because of that. So, hi, thank you for being here. It really helps out my channel a lot when people subscribe and engage with my content, and it helps move me closer to my goal of being able to make more of it, so thank you very much for that. If you're not a subscriber yet, you probably should be, but I'm biased. Either way, I will hopefully see you next time. And as always, thanks for watching.